It stands for All Things Analog. It was kind of, I think, a natural progression over years, basically. A lot of people come to this city to study music. It's got a very good music college with a really great reputation. And it's a great city for living in as a musician. So over the years, you start to think, and this actually made me think about North Brewery a lot, actually. How did the brewery start? So for me, being a musician, you're gigging every night, or you're going out, you're playing, you're, trying to earn a living. And then you start to think about, well, maybe I'd like to make my own music and how that would happen. It kind of started off, I used to work in a club called The Wardrobe, if you remember The Wardrobe. But I worked there so often, I actually had a lot of my gigging equipment would always be there. But then I started to bring recording equipment down there. So I started to record in the basement club during the day, and I'd always been interested in that kind of aspect of creation and creating the music. So it just naturally evolved until I always wanted a studio. It just seemed like the natural thing to do. And then we found a little building or garages in Headingley, and that's where it began. And like all these little ideas just have lived with me for a very long time, like the idea of it all being, basically I was never satisfied at other studios. I wanted it to sound in a specific way to the records that I kind of collected and inspired me. So like in my mind, I was like, why does it not sound like this? I'll start buying equipment that they used to use. So that's where all the analog stuff came from. And then it just made sense as well. Well, if we're going to make music, why not just have your own studio? It's cheaper than paying for somebody else's, and you've got more access to it. And then the people that I worked with over the years, you would sort of get to understand what their flavors and what they could add to things were. I'm going to keep on adding sort of like beer puns, I think, by accident. I actually, my first tape machine that I bought in Leeds was from George Evelyn, Nightmares on Wax. So I remember George comes to the studio occasionally to record stuff. And I do remind him, I remember going to his house, paid £200 for it, this 8-track tape machine. And lots of people laughed at that for some reason.
And look at you now.
Exactly. It was a really good tape machine. I don't know what's wrong with it. We recorded some really good albums on that. So that was the first thing that I bought. Perthshire in Scotland, sort of north of Edinburgh. And there's a lot of Scottish people here. Well, there's a lot of people, like the music college draws people from all over. And I think that's the really interesting thing about Leeds. This is kind of like one of your questions that you might ask later, but I've thought about this a lot. Leeds it's a little bit like a Goldilocks zone in a way. Like this is the latest thing that I've been thinking about it, because it's not so big that life is really hard, to earn money. It's sort of small enough, but also big enough at the same time. And then it's also drawing all these musicians every year. Like new musicians arrive, and then you've got different communities as well that bring their own musicians to that. And I don't think I know lots of people who move away from Leeds, and they don't find the same thing in other cities. It's like there's a documentary actually on YouTube about Leeds from 1982-83 called A Town Like New Orleans. Now I don't know if this is true, but the premise of the documentary is that Leeds has the same musicians per square mile as New Orleans. Right, and it's like it might be true, it might not be, but that's what Leeds has. So I've learned so many different styles of music from all these different experts who are only 10 minutes away from 20 minutes away from my house. It's like that's what's amazing about Leeds. And you also have venues and places that kind of support that music scene. So it's just this little pocket where all this stuff can sort of grow and happen, and that's why I've never left. Well, we can talk about ones that aren't here anymore. Maybe that's how I'm getting on a bit. But like when I first came here, there was a place called The Underground, I don't know if you were old enough, you might not be old enough. So the Underground is opposite where the old music college used to be. And that's where all these funk and soul nights, well, that was one of the venues for all the funk and soul nights. But at the moment, we're on the label, we're releasing a sort of mambo track, a mambo band. But it's like, I've just been writing about this recently because I remember going to the Underground, which was a great venue because you just went down this flight of stairs. And first of all, like the bouncer, Gary, one of the main bouncers, just became, everybody knew Gary. He was just like the friendliest guy. And like, I haven't seen him for years actually, but you know, he went on to work at other clubs as well. But you go, so first of all, you're met by this brilliant bouncer, and then like you go down the stairs and open these doors. As you're going down, you can just like feel the energy of the music and the, you know, the funk and the soul and everything. They used to have bands from all over the world, like quite famous ones. So I remember going down there to a night called Casa Latina. It's like my first experience. Like, I'm from Scotland, I haven't seen Latin music. I haven't seen Latin music before. You know, I go down and there's like some guy from, I don't know where, but he's only speaking Spanish. He's got a huge cigar in his mouth, and you know, they're just pumping out Spanish Harlem, you know, sort of salsa, you know, and things like that. Like those are experiences that I couldn't believe when I arrived here. You know, you could see that every night of the week. What Leeds provides, why I didn't leave, is this kind of place for people to grow as a musician. You know, it's like the live music scene has changed massively since I started playing, but even more so, you know, post-COVID and all this kind of stuff, you know. But being able to like learn your craft by going out and playing and getting that feedback from, oh, that was a good song, that was a good performance, or, you know, it's like where can you learn that? You know, so that's why I find Leeds to be like a really special place. Another tune that was in the charts in the 80s was Jackie Wilson's Reet Petite. And it's kind of like, what information have I got to like that previously? You know, nothing. But it's like I was just drawn to this kind of music, you know, and as I grew up, you kind of found out more little bits, you know, about it. What do I like about it? Rhythm. It kind of makes me want to move my body. I think there's a lot of humanity comes across in like struggle, you know, and things like that. It comes across in jazz, funk and soul. You know, it's maybe born out of conditions that weren't easy for the people who pioneered. Well, definitely weren't easy for the people who pioneered it, you know, and who brought these incredible styles to the forefront of popular sort of consciousness, you know. So it feels very real. So I connect with it very easily, and also it's not often perfect, and I really like that about it. I became aware of things like IPA, you know, like really nice beers to enjoy, that, you know, that you enjoyed beyond sort of the act of I'm having a drink tonight. Just before I found out I was gluten intolerant, right? So I found like IPAs, and I was kind of like, oh, these are lovely, these are amazing. I really liked. I definitely gravitate towards the kind of like the citrusy, sort of refreshing sort of pale ales, which North has two amazing ones that I found out recently. I'm not a sort of like a huge drinker, but so you want that one drink, you know, to be really satisfying, and I kind of find those kind of like specific kind of artisan kind of IPAs or whatever, you know, really hit the spot. You know, almost like in the say, it has so many parallels with making music, all of it, cooking, you know, brewing, you know, making music. You know, when you start to find that stuff that's kind of made by people with real passion, you know, that's when you start to find the real gold. Like, it's almost like pairings, isn't it? It's like having the right pairing. You know, like I often find, like, for example, I will enjoy a beer a lot more if I've done a hard day's work. You know, it's kind of like that's when a beer feels the most satisfying to me. You know, but then also, like pairing all those things with it, like when you're having a curry. You know, I love cooking curries, and you'll find a lot of musicians and even people who work in studios. Not a lot that I know are really good cooks or really into cooking. You know, so it's like Indian food with a really nice IPA. You know, like in the same sense, like, you know, the right piece of music at that moment. They all kind of aid each other. They all accentuate each other or bring out the best of each other in the right circumstances. Alongside with this collab, we thought it'd be a really interesting idea to provide a piece of music to enjoy with the beer, sort of like a really interesting pairing. So it's from a project that I do quite a lot called Work Money Death, which is a kind of, it's mainly around a friend of mine from Leeds who is in his sort of late 50s, who's just one of the greatest tenor players this country has, and you've never heard of him, basically, you know, but people are starting to hear of him now, which is great. So a lot of the music that we do is kind of pretty improvised, really, kind of off the cuff. Now, we do lots of preparation that leads up to that moment, so don't think that it's just, you know, we just throw it out there, you know. But the piece of music that we've done, Tony came in with an idea for a kind of like a ballad, and it's the first time 3 or 4 of us kind of played it together. So you get like a really organic moment, and it's also, it's at a pace where I'd like to enjoy a beer, if you know what I mean. It's not frantic. It's kind of, I made a video for it a wee while ago, which is just jellyfish underwater, you know, so it's got a very kind of serene sort of quality to it. So I could imagine it's the first drink of an evening, you know, the first time you've tasted that beer or whatever, and it's not a short track either, you know, so it gives you a good 10-12 minutes to enjoy your beer without rushing it. Really interesting thing about Tony, like Tony, we can play quite out there jazz, but we used to play a gig on Tuesday nights and there was no door fee, so anybody would walk in off of the door. Now, I've seen lots of people at jazz gigs kind of like, what's this? You know, not really wanting to be there. But whenever Tony played, anybody would be engaged, and we'd have people coming up to us afterwards kind of going, what was that? What kind of, you know, so you don't even have to be a jazz fan. You just, because, and I asked Tony once, it's like, why do you think people kind of, you know, sort of connect so well with what you do? And he says, I always play from the heart. Oh, just bigger and better. Yeah. Is it like that's? It's kind of, I guess, probably the same when you're making beer. It's always about like, can I make this better? Can we write better music? Can we record it better? You know, can we perform it better? You know, we just, as a group of people, we're all kind of focused on just making more music. You know, it's kind of like at this place. You know, you're not going to stop making beer, are you? So it's the same way ATA, really. Just want to make more music.